Welcome to this episode of Afro Perspectives. I'm going to discuss the funeral of the late Air Force Commodore Peter Zimondi, which took place in the past few days at Chikerema village in Hwedza. Constantino Chiwenga attended the funeral, but Emmerson Mnangagwa and Kembo Mohadi did not. Like everything else concerning Zanu PF, this points to the widening of the rift between Mnangagwa and his rival Constantino Chiwenga. Peter Zimondi had a distinguished career in the Air Force. He was a student at Kwenda Secondary School in the late 1970s, when as a teenager he cut short his studies and crossed over into Mozambique. And then that's when he got trained in one of the guerrilla camps. At independence he found himself at Rushinga Assembly Point. He was attested into the Air Force of Zimbabwe as an air sub-lieutenant, and then in 1982 he was selected for pilot training in Nigeria, and then on his way back he was promoted to air sub-lieutenant, and then from then on he was promoted through the ranks until his retirement as an Air Commodore. I'll just have to do a bit of explaining here. In the Air Force of Zimbabwe, the rank of an Air Commodore is the army equivalent of a brigadier general. So this was not your average soldier. He was a general, someone with a distinguished record. He spent the best years of his life, 37 years to be precise, in the military. We all know that the top hierarchy in both the Army and the Air Force have been participating in loads of shady activities, especially with keeping the opposition out of power. To be fair, that cannot be placed on the shoulders of one individual. We have to find some way to change the whole system where the top hierarchy of the military are not engaging in politics. The military should stay out of politics. That is the point. They should be in the cantonment areas waiting to be deployed in defense of the country's interest. So when it comes to someone who was just a bit player in a bigger game, we have to give them the respect they deserve and then try to sort out the system. There is no doubt Peter Zimondi should have been declared a national hero. He should have been buried at the hero's acre. Emmerson Mnangagwa did neither of those. So if you have got Peter Zimondi and he is not buried at the hero's acre, so who is a hero then? The Herald, that mouthpiece of the Zanu PF party, decided not to mention Peter Zimondi's background as a war vet. It only mentioned that after the war he went on to Rushinga Assembly Point. Peter Zimondi was cousin to the late parents Shiri and was brother to the late Parazai Zimondi. Both Shiri and Parazai Zimondi fell out with Emmerson Mnangagwa. In fact, Emmerson Mnangagwa from 2019 onwards has been trying to distance himself from the generals who executed the coup. The coup of November 2017 is a millstone around Mnangagwa's neck, a constant reminder that those who carried him to the State House can remove him at any time. If Zimbabwe at all was a democratic sort of place, we would have an independent commission, a body set up as a matter of law, and then that body would have been staffed with by civil servants, and that would have actually been the body that declares who is a national hero and who is not. There would have been objective criteria to verify who did what during the War of Liberation and after independence. But that's not the case right now. That aside, there are cases where individuals who have declined to be buried at the hero's acre. Take the case of Robert Mugabe himself. It was Mugabe who invited a North Korean company, Matsudayo Overseas Projects, to build the National Cemetery. It was completed in 1982. Since it was Robert Mugabe's pet project, one would have expected he had a place reserved for himself. I've heard rumors that there is an empty spot next to Salim Mugabe's grave. But then when Robert Mugabe died in 2019, his family declared that it was his wish to be buried in Kutama, his rural village. In Robert Mugabe's case, no one in Zanu PF could declare him a national hero. That was it. The old man was still bitter about November 2017 and being humiliated by people he thought were his comrades. So what is the point of having that national cemetery, the National Heroes Acre? The point is that the National Heroes Acre is a Zanu PF project, full stop. Those who are falling out with whoever is running Zanu PF, they have to do with something else. Take the case of General Lookout Masuku. He commanded a whole army, the Zipra army. After independence in 1982, he was jailed by Robert Mugabe on allegations of plotting a coup. He was cleared of early wrongdoing by the Supreme Court in 1983. Even that was not enough to save him. He was subsequently jailed again using the Prime Minister's emergency regulation. That is a polite way of saying there were no charges against him. When he was released from prison in 1986, he was dying of cancer and he was buried at Stanley Cemetery in Bulawayo. When we talk of heroes of the Liberation War, it can't get better than Lookout Masuku. He just happened to have fought on the wrong side of the war, that is for Zipra. Tumise Dalenga died in May of 2019. During the War of Liberation, he was Zipra's head of intelligence. Just like Lookout Masuku, he was jailed by Robert Mugabe after independence. At his funeral in Dallas in Duna in 2019, Emmerson Mnangagwa and his two deputies, Mohadi and Chiwenga, did not show up. So we now have the major reason why Peter Zimondi was not declared a national hero. It is because of the November 2017 coup. His brother Parazai and his cousin Perez were both major players in the November 2017 coup. Both members of the Joint Operations Command, the Joint Operations Command, that is a short way of saying the brains behind the November 2017 coup. The mention of such an organization strikes fear at the heart of the Lacoste faction. Like I've said before, anyone who was associated with the coup plotters is now a threat to the ambitions of Emmerson Mnangagwa and his Lacoste faction. So what are Mnangagwa's plans? Or put another way, is there any roadmap for another dictatorship? Yes, that is pretty much what is in store for the people of Zimbabwe. After the 2017 coup, the first step was neutralizing the opposition. On this, both Chiwenga and Mnangagwa were united against their common enemy, Nelson Chamisa's Triple C, the opposition. They infiltrated the party using Sengezo Shalangu. As we all saw, Shalangu destroyed the Triple C through those recalls. The Triple C is now effectively an extension of Zanu PF. There is no longer any opposition party in Zimbabwe, at least with enough political leverage to challenge Zanu PF. So we are back to the dark days of a one-party dictatorship. Just this past few weeks, Mnangagwa rewarded Sengezo Shalangu by giving him $1.6 million. This is money meant for the official opposition in parliament, but has now gone to the imposter who calls himself Secretary General of the Triple C. But the Triple C represented opposition outside of Zanu PF. The next target was opposition from within Zanu PF. Like I've said before, the G40 is long gone. Its luminaries are scattered all over the region. Jonathan Moyo is enjoying the generosity of his in-laws somewhere in Nairobi, Kenya. Honda Mzengi is now in South Africa. Tyson Kasukuwe is back in Zimbabwe but is under constant surveillance by the secret services. Grace Mugabe is turned into a vegetable patch at a rural homestead in Kutama. Then Constantino Chiwenga went to Malawi and decided to stay there with his in-laws. So the real threat to Mnangagwa's plans comes from his former allies, the guys who executed the coup while he was in Johannesburg. His Chiwenga and his allies. That explains the succession of deaths when it comes to generals both retired and still serving. Emmerson Mnangagwa has a plan in place, although he has publicly declared that he is stepping down in 2028 after the expiry of his term. He is secretly putting in place all that is needed to succeed himself in 2030. There are provisions in the constitution limiting a sitting president to 2 terms. Lavmo Matuke is the cabinet minister in charge of making sure that those 2-term limit obstacle is done away with. That's an easy thing for Zanu PF to do. It's just a matter of tabling those amendments and Sharangu will deliver the votes. So we have got Robert Mugabe who wanted to die in power. Then the sitting president, Emmerson Mnangagwa, has plans in place to go even further than that. He wants to establish a dynasty. When Mugabe wanted to be like life president, Mnangagwa wants to be king, a monarchy. The signs are all for there to see. Take for instance his son David. He is the deputy minister of finance. His other son, Sean Mnangagwa, is a major in the army. He has been sent to China for advanced military training. Then we have his nephew, Tongai Mnangagwa, who is also a deputy minister of tourism. So there you have it. Mnangagwa does not care about people accusing of nepotism. That is just a minor issue to him. At stake is his plans for a dynasty. This is a vicious dictatorship in the making. Emmerson Mnangagwa looks up to places like Equatorial Guinea. Teodoro Obiang, the president, appointed his son Teodoro Ngoma Obiang Mangwe as vice president. You might think I'm exaggerating here, but that is what Mnangagwa has in store for Zimbabwe, a political dynasty. Equatorial Guinea is not the only place where this has happened in Africa, where we have a political dynasty in the making. In Gabon, President Ali Bongo Ondimba succeeded his father Omar Bongo. Then we have Congo Brazzaville, where President Denis Sassou Nguesso has appointed his son Denis Christel as cabinet minister. Even Uganda, where Yoweri Museveni has a son Mohadi, who is a 4-star general and head of the Uganda People's Defense Force. Mohadi is slated to take over from Yoweri Museveni once he is passed away. In the early 90s, Robert Mugabe had 5-year plans. Those were targets for developing the country. Now we have a different kind of dictator with 5-year plans for first eliminating all forms of opposition to his rule, and then succeeding himself, and then building a political dynasty. That is the kind of dictatorship where we have. Zanu PF, judging by the plans for a third term, is the only institution working in Zimbabwe. You have to remember that in 2008, the economy imploded, and since then the country has never recovered. You might have heard of certain countries being referred to as failed states. Take for instance Somalia, then the Democratic Republic of Congo, and then the Central African Republic. These are all failed states, countries where the state has all but collapsed and nothing works. That is the Zimbabwe we are now talking about right now. Zimbabwe is now a failed state, no doubt about that. Let's make no pretense about that. Air Zimbabwe, the national airline, collapsed a long time ago. The currency, the Zim dollar, was abandoned a long time ago. The railway network collapsed ages ago. Then you have the national football team, which has to play its matches in Kigali Stadium because the so-called national stadium is now derelict and cannot match standards set by FIFA. Take any hospital you want, be it perinatal or Pilo, and there is a long list of equipment shortages. Pregnant mothers in Beitbridge have to cross the border to give birth at the maternity unit in Msino. And then you have got Victoria Falls, where pregnant mothers have to give birth across the border in Zambia at the maternity unit at the hospital in Livingstone. You ask yourself, how has it all come to this? It's the Zanu PF government's upside down priorities. Even if you were to agree that Zim is a failed state, some things are working. And those are the things you need to keep the wheels of tyranny and dictatorship running. After the succession of deaths relating to the generals in the military, you can safely conclude that Mnangagwa is pouring resources into the CIO. As far as I can tell, that is the only organization that is functioning. And then maybe you might say the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission when it comes to rigging elections. The ruling party, Zanu PF, is there only to prolong the suffering of ordinary Zimbabweans. There is nothing to justify the party staying in power. Zimbabweans have constantly been voting for the opposition since 2002, and the reason why we are in this mess is to do with the generals. let's be honest with each other. In 2002, we had Zinu, the then commander of the Defense Forces of Zimbabwe, declaring that even if Tsvangirai could win the election, they would not allow him to take over. He declared that they would not salute someone with no liberation war background. Then we have Zanu PF, and at this point in time it is safe to say that the party is torn by factional fights, with the Lacoste faction fighting the Coast Lake faction headed by Chiwenga. For the uninitiated, the Coast Lake faction has its origins in Zimbabwe's involvement in the Democratic Republic of Congo. In 1998, Laurent Desire Kabila, the then president of the Democratic Republic of Congo, gave the Zimbabwe Defense Forces mining concessions in the town of Mbujimai, and that was to exploit diamonds. The military top brass formed a company called Coast Lake to exploit these diamonds. The generals grew extremely rich, and from then onwards they gained political clout. So one is tempted to ask, if the generals were so useful to Robert Mugabe, why is Emmerson Mnangagwa afraid of them? The answer is really straightforward. Emmerson Mnangagwa is the only politician in Zanu PF with a full grasp of what the generals can do. Plus, planning for the coup was a task carried out by the generals themselves, despite Emmerson Mnangagwa's lame attempts to convince the world that he was part of the plot. It might surprise you to learn that for the first coup executed by the generals was in 2008. In that election, in 2008, Tsvangirai won 73% of the vote, and Robert Mugabe had actually agreed to step down. The generals stepped in and ordered Mugabe to stay put. They simply told him he was going nowhere. From then on, Chiwenga became the second center of power in Zimbabwe. In November 2017, that was the second coup. The generals came out of the shadows and took over power for themselves. The problem they faced was that the coups were a West African thing. What they wanted was to convince SADC that Zanu PF had the small problem of who should take over from Mugabe. That is why we heard phrases like military assisted transition instead of calling what the generals were doing a coup d'etat. Immediately after the coup, Jonathan Moyo gave a harrowing account of how commandos from the Special Air Services had pumped bullets into his front door while he was trying to save his disabled son from gunfire. Tyson Kasukuwere was also paid a visit by the Special Air Services, and he narrowly escaped with his life. Unlike Tyson and Jonathan Moyo, who managed to escape with their lives, Ignatius Chombo, another G40 stalwart, was abducted by what he called masked men, and he was badly beaten. Emmerson Mnangagwa might enjoy a whole battalion, the presidential guard protecting him. He might have a convoy with over 10 cars, but what he is afraid of is that the next time the generals are going to execute another coup d'etat, he is target number one. I have to apologize if I'm using insensitive language, but the deaths of the generals is the only way Emmerson Mnangagwa can do away with the threat of another coup. It is his only insurance plan. At this point in time, Zanu PF is like a cattle pen with two bulls fighting for the same head of cows. Only one of them can dominate the head. Take for instance the recent helicopter crash in Masvingo after the Munumtaba Day celebrations. Chiwenga was supposed to be in that plane. So this is where we are with Zanu PF in a state of civil war, but the casualties seem to be be from one side of Zanu PF, the Coast Lake faction. The tragedy is that the generals are dying agonizing deaths, and that is not acceptable. Thank you for following this piece, and please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you. Bye.